Welcome into another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by thehoosier.com and also presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors, carrying all the gear you need from all the top brands at prices you'll love. Welcome into the show. John Alden with you as always. Indiana football is coming off of their biggest win in their lengthy, horrendous history of a football program, but that has all been thrown out the window now that the Hoosiers have gone on the road to previously unbeaten number 3 Oregon. They had the longest active winning streak in the regular season. They had the longest winning streak at Outson Stadium, or I should say in any home stadium for that matter. And Indiana also picks up their first ever top 5 win, AP top 5 win, I should say. And the Hoosiers are high flying and have reached an echelon that has never been reached before in Bloomington. And they may not have even hit their ceiling yet. So that's what we're going to get in today. Got a lot of football talk in store. Mitchell Paige back after taking the week off last week. We're also going to talk with Kenny Jordan from Spartan Mag later on in the show to preview this upcoming Saturday's Old Brass Spittoon game. So a lot of football stuff. And for those of you who are kind of already getting geared up for basketball season, which, by the way, if you're one of those people, there's 2 types of people that probably is. And I don't mean for this to be offensive, but maybe it'll come off that way. It's either you're only an Indiana basketball fan and you've never cared about football, and that's totally fine, or you're a basketball first fan, and like that, and that's where probably most Indiana fans stand. But here's the other thing: even if you are a basketball first IU fan, I don't get how you can give a back seat to what's going on with Indiana football right now, because even compared to last year, there is a chance that they could reach even more unprecedented success this season now, with the sky being the limit, an undefeated season potentially on the horizon. I'm talking regular season, of course. And you're on a collision course with the Ohio State Buckeyes to potentially have both teams be 12-0 in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game. So we'll get into all that and much more. Again, I know Big Ten basketball media days took place not too long ago. If you want to hear more on that, this is not the show where you're going to find that right now. I know some people may be disappointed by that. We will shift into basketball mode at some point. There is going to be a lot of crossover here very soon. But there's plenty of other shows on thehoosier.com that will go more in depth right now with some Indiana basketball stuff, because quite frankly, I cannot give my full attention to Indiana basketball with what's going on with the football team. So nothing against Darren DeVries, nothing against the new era of Indiana basketball that is coming. I am looking forward to seeing how things will change this year with a new head coach in Assembly Hall. But this is something that, again, go back to last year. Last year was something brand new and fun with Indiana football. This is that next step that I don't know if any of us really thought. We thought it was possible. We knew that there was a chance, but when one of your wins is against one of the current perennial powers, Oregon, on the road for that matter, the discussions about the expectations for Indiana football have officially shifted into territory that they've never been in before. And we're going to continue that discussion with our friend Mitchell Paige here in just a moment. But I want to continue to tell you real quick about Academy Sports and Outdoors, carrying all the gear you need from the top brands, all at prices you'll love. And now shopping at Academy is more convenient than ever. They offer free assembly on in-store purchases on bikes and grills, plus free and easy curbside pickup on academy.com orders. You can also save even more by opening and using an Academy Sports and Outdoors credit card. That'll get you 5% off future purchases when you're approved. Save time and money at Academy Sports and Outdoors and have fun out there. Joining us once again, who else other than the one, the only Mitchell Paige, back on In Touch with Indiana Sports after a week off during the idle week for the Hoosiers. He's back, and he looks a little like Mike Kadick today, if I do say so myself.
I'm a mustachioed man today.
His looks better than mine.
His looks better than mine. Mine is pretty preposterous, but It's what we're going with right now.
And it really, you could do whatever you want with the facial hair, and I think people would be excited about it because with Indiana football, you can do no wrong right now. I think I said something right before we started recording, and I'll try to go ahead and say it again. And Indiana was faced with this mountain that we kind of set in front of them at the beginning of the season, and the mountain's always there every year. It's usually in the form of an Ohio State. This year it was in the form of an Oregon, and it was kind of the standard that Indiana has been, at least through this era of Cignetti being here for a year and a half now. It was the next step into kind of joining that upper echelon in some way, shape, or form. And after, I guess this would be attempt number 3 with Curt Cignetti. You failed against Ohio State. You failed against Notre Dame. I hate calling it a failure, but I mean that, they didn't get the job done in those games. But they finally met the moment in Eugene. They got it done, 30-20. They completely ended Oregon's longest, it was the current longest regular season winning streak in college football, current longest home winning streak in college football, and Indiana's first ever win against an AP top 5 team on the road. And now they sit at number 3 in the AP poll. They're undefeated behind Miami, who you also are a fan of, and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Mitchell, I'll give you the floor now.
Yeah, it's funny to say like this. We were talking before the show, and you said the word they finally met the moment is how you phrased it. But you see what happened at Penn State. I mean, that's been a pretty solid program. I don't even know what the word I'm trying to find is, but you would call that an upper echelon team in the Big Ten, and they don't win games like this. Teams have tried and failed for a year and a half to beat Oregon in the Big Ten, and no one has done it. Ohio State went to Oregon last year and didn't do it. This isn't – when I was looking at the schedule before the year, I've been on the show and said, do I think we can win? Absolutely. But even if they lose, that's not like a, man, you didn't rise to the occasion. I think last year with Ohio State, there was just so much excitement built up to that moment. But this just, it felt like the biggest building block of the season in my own mind, and this is my own fault for selling them short on what they can accomplish, apparently. The biggest step they could have made forward as a program was going to Iowa and winning. I talked a ton about how Iowa always had an identity. If you don't think that's a good team, you don't watch football, especially at home when a top team is coming there. Iowa presents a lot of problems that are pretty unique because of the way that they play, and it's just not an easy place to win. So that was like even Illinois didn't care about it. Going to Iowa, that was going to be the benchmark. And you handle that test, and then you go and do what you did to Oregon. A team that going into the game, every stupid show that I definitely watch way too much of is talking about how Oregon is a national championship caliber team. They're in that upper echelon with Ohio State, Miami. Like those 3 teams have kind of separated themselves from the field. And you don't beat Oregon with fancy scheme. You just beat them like a really a national championship caliber team does. You beat them at the line of scrimmage, and you beat them over the course of 60 minutes. You handle some adversity. You make mistakes, and then you go right down the field and score a touchdown. They have a lot of athletes on their team. They have some explosive plays. You're able to bear down. I'm thinking about the defensive possession right before half that led to the missed field goal. Oregon it felt like they had found some rhythm, and that felt really dangerous. They had a couple first downs in a row. They had some explosive plays, and then you're able to hold, and you get the missed field goal and find a couple plays on offense, and then your kicker – the first one would have been good from the moon. He kicked that one 90 yards. It just every time Oregon, a national championship caliber team, threw a punch at Indiana, they responded punching harder. And it cannot be overstated how impressive that is, because you have to talk about Indiana now. I think we joked about it a little bit. Maybe it wasn't on the show. But after the Illinois game, like, is Indiana going to win the national championship? There's a legitimate chance that they're going to win the national championship.
Yeah, and I think whether you're a fan of Indiana, whether you're someone who's been around the program for a long time, like yourself, who's played in the program, or an outsider, I think this might be the first ever full circle. Like, no matter where you stand, especially when it comes to the media, I don't think there's anybody. I mean, yeah, you can argue whether or not they will actually get it done and win it, but I don't think there's anybody at this point who would say that they aren't at least in that contender conversation anymore.
Yeah, there's if anyone has that take, they're just not watching the games. From the first game of the season, I include Old Dominion in this, it was physical destruction in every game that they've played. You wear down Iowa, wear them down, bend, don't break. You beat the doors off Illinois. You wear down Oregon. Obviously, the first 3 games, whatever, but you wear down teams. We talked about establishing physicality. Old Dominion, the offense that we saw at Old Dominion that everybody was like, oh my gosh, we're the worst team ever. That started what we saw on Saturday. They have established a physical mentality, identity that it's as good as anyone at the point.
I think it also, I want to go ahead and mention this, I guess, before it leaves my train of thought. But while we're talking physicality, and you think of the Indiana defensive front 7, you play against this offensive line who had given up 1 sack all season long, and you give up 6, plus I think it was 3 or 4 tackles for loss in addition to that. There's no argument that not only is this probably the best Indiana football defensive front of all time, but it may well be the best defensive front in the nation, arguably against Ohio State. They won't play each other until potentially a Big Ten championship game, I would imagine. But it's wild that Indiana could ever go toe-to-toe with another elite team's offensive line and then handily dominate them. And maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I don't feel like there's any reason to think that Indiana did not take care of business when it comes to that matter of things.
Yeah, those are 4- and 5-star players all over that field for Oregon, all over the place. That's as elite a talent pool as you're going to find. If you go just star for star, one of the best rosters in all of college football. And you did exactly what you said. You controlled the line of scrimmage. You controlled the pace of the game. You got Dante Moore, Heisman frontrunner, off his grass. Happy feet, making throws that he wouldn't typically make. They'd given up 1 sack all year. I'd say their line's probably pretty good. Penn State couldn't even swing at him. They didn't even get close to him. And Indiana just was in his lap all afternoon. And it was, I'll tell you the coolest part. Obviously, Indiana's had a lot of cool things happening and winning a lot of games. And I've got a core group of guys that I used to play with, but that we still talk about the games. I mean, obviously, there's a big group of guys, but core group of guys that we talk about the games still. But as I think it was right after Isaiah Jones' interception, I got like 6 or 7 calls back to back from guys that I haven't played with or haven't talked to in a while that know that I follow it really closely. And we were just, it was so cool to feel how proud they were to be an Indiana Hoosier, because when I left, it felt like we were building towards something. Now, do I take any credit for what's happening right now? That would be very dumb of me. But it felt like we had it kind of going in the right direction, and then we just became an embarrassment. And it felt like all the work that we did was for nothing. And it was, of course, I was still proud to be an alum, to have played there. You weren't super proud of the product. Like, you weren't excited to tell somebody when Indiana was playing, like, those are my guys. the sense of pride that I had, that I still have. I haven't stopped thinking about it since the game ended. Just how cool it is to have something like this happen to us when you didn't think that it was necessarily possible. I mean, it's one of the most impressive wins I think we'll ever. It's a day that I will not forget for the rest of my life. And it's not because I think the reason I won't forget it is because it didn't feel like an upset.
Yeah, that's true. Like if Indiana, there's a scenario where Indiana wins this game and it looks a little fluky. Maybe they get a couple of I mean, they got some interceptions, but they were more
That was
so
to
when
seal the deal.
it was
It
to
was
seal the
already
deal. It was a
over.
different type of scenario. But maybe Indiana, goes pound for pound with them. Maybe Oregon's. Here's the other thing we haven't thrown out yet. I think Oregon only had one lead the entire game, 7-3.
7-3.
Maybe this is a game where Oregon, is controlling the pace, leading the majority of the game. Maybe Indiana's the one matching instead of Oregon tying the game up, that sort of thing. And Indiana gets, some late game. I don't want to call it, the way the Iowa game ended, that was some late game heroics, but that also didn't feel fluky necessarily. Yeah. But at the same time, Indiana was succumbing to what Iowa wanted to do for that entire game. Mm-hmm. Indiana did, but I don't even think really we truly believe they would be able to do it. And that was dictate the pace of the game. And so I guess going full circle to what you began with here, there's no scenario where this is an accidental win for Indiana. They made this happen playing their style, which again, I guess going back to the beginning of this segment, when we talked to Ohio State and Notre Dame and how those games played out, that was far from what we saw this past weekend. And you're going to have people mention, oh, maybe Oregon maybe they're a good team, but maybe they're not that good. Look at that Penn State team that they beat on the road. Look what happened to them. And I want to say this about Penn State real quick. The Penn State team, the roster they have built, that is a good team. They let that Oregon team break them down in almost an exact same fashion that Michael Penix's Hoosiers did to a James Franklin coached Penn State team back in 2020. That team also spiraled out of control. Of course, that was the first time it happened. He was still their head coach after that. Did some great things in the following years. But now you saw the exact same thing, and now James Franklin's been fired. So I don't think that Penn State team that Oregon defeated was bad. I think they've crumbled and they're spiraling out of control. But don't let people say that the Oregon team isn't good because they haven't beaten anybody just yet. They broke Penn State, and maybe other teams would have eventually done it. But Indiana beat one of the better teams in college football this past Saturday.
Yeah, and they show that they're 2 of the 3 or 1, 2, whatever you want to rank them. I think it's a legitimate argument that there's nobody better than them. I think Ohio State's pretty solid, obviously.
I think with Ohio State, they're number one until they show that they're not.
Yeah, they haven't shown any chinks in the armor. They're tough at every position. I think their quarterback's great, but nobody has a more impressive win than going to Oregon and winning. Nobody. I don't care if it's Alabama, Georgia,
even Ohio. The Texas win at the beginning of the year was seen as a marquee win. And it is a good win for Ohio.
But it's
State,
at home. It's at home.
And Texas has kind of thrown in some clunkers here and there since then.
Going into a place like that, Oregon is such a unique environment too. I don't know why. It just feels like their home stadium just carries a little bit different juice than
it's like
some
you're
other
playing
places.
In a rainforest.
It's really cool. And it's really easy to be distracted by all the glitz and the glamour, the cool jerseys, which I did not like their jersey choice on Saturday, by the way.
I like the helmets, but the jerseys almost looked a little like soccery. I don't know if that makes any sense, but they kind of look like soccer kits.
The color combination I didn't like, which when I saw them, I was like, all right, we got a chance because we're not going to be like, wow, those are cool jerseys. But just you handle so much. You have explosive play on a really cool play design by Oregon. One of the coolest plays I've seen all year. Just a ton of misdirection. You scored a guy through the middle. It just was a sweet play. You go back to the sideline, you talk about it, and then you really don't give up anything else. They scored 3 points after they did that fake, not fake punt that goes down to our 1 yard line. They get like 7 yards on that next possession after we punt it. They kick a field goal. And it was domination. It was so impressive in every aspect, the kicking game, offense, defense. Great teams play complete games on the biggest stages. And outside of maybe a couple penalties, which I don't know the rule on this.
Oh, yeah, let's get into the false starts because that was some interesting – go ahead and say what you were going to say, but this is a very interesting thing.
I was under the impression that the quick shift by the D-line is illegal. Like
I've never seen anybody do that, and I'm sure other teams have, but I've never seen that happen before.
Because I don't think it's legal. I don't think you can mass shift your whole defensive line like when you're over the ball. I think that's the rule. Like, I don't think you can cross the center's face with a player. I'm not 100% sure on that. This may be totally out of whack. If it is, tell John. Don't tell me. I don't care. I think it was illegal. But you add in all the crowd noise. It was always going to be tough to stay on sides. I was happy. I was very active on Twitter in this game. I was also very active on Twitter against Iowa. And I had some people talking about how we need to fix our snap count and our silent count isn't correct. Luckily, this week I didn't have any of that from the guys that played in middle school and think they understand what it's like to play in front of 80,000 people.
Which, by the way, I don't think Autzen Stadium holds that much more than Memorial Stadium.
Is it? I think it's like 65 or 70.
It's more than Indiana holds, but it's not significant. And I guess it's just the shape of the stadium that creates the environment that they have. But it's not like you're going into Bryant-Denny or Michigan. And I know Michigan Stadium, according to you, is one of the quietest places to play.
Whispers. Especially now.
But either way, yeah.
Stinks.
Do what?
Especially now, that team stinks, Michigan.
Yeah, Sharon Moore's a bum. I've said it from the beginning, and his days are probably no. I tell you what, though, we're not going to talk much about this right now, but this coaching carousel is going to be – it's already ridiculous. The amount of coaches that have been fired at the halfway point, by the halfway point of this college football season, with more to come, is
unprecedented.
Is bonkers. And I want to go ahead and say this, too. I don't want to talk much about this right now either, but – I am not the least bit worried about Curt Cignetti leaving for any job that opens up.
The only one that when I first heard that Franklin was fired, you just think about the connection and going back.
Oh, being from Pennsylvania.
That's where he's from. I'm like, okay, man, it was less than 1%. But I drove back from Gatlinburg, Tennessee today for a family vacation. It was supposed to take 6 hours. Took 8.
Damn.
So I had a lot of time to sit in the car and listen to sports, mostly IU, talk. And they were talking about James Franklin, and I can't remember who said it, but it's pretty insane. You think about again, this is for people that actually watch the games today and understand what the landscape is today, not in the 80s, now. I couldn't think of more than a couple jobs that are better than Indiana right now. You have all the money in the world. You've already built an absolute wagon. You're in year 2. You don't even have all your own guys yet. Haven't even had a full recruiting cycle, like of bringing your own high school recruits in and getting them graduated. The backing, I mean, I'm pretty sure he could go, I don't even know what you would ask for, whatever you want.
That's the thing. He can be given a God tier, amount from Florida or Penn State. And apparently Matt Rule is the current top target for Penn State, which I feel like that's a lateral move from James Franklin. Either way, I mean, Penn State's going to do.
Matt Rule. That'd be great. Because then we keep whooping them.
We'll see. I'll tell you what, one thing that'll be interesting to see with Penn State this week, and I know we're getting sidetracked, is how they respond to after firing their coach. I mean, we saw what UCLA's been doing.
That game got a little more interesting, didn't it?
I mean, UCLA, between Indiana's next two opponents, Michigan State and UCLA, I'm more worried about UCLA.
Well, UCLA just beat Michigan State by 7.
That's what I'm saying. Points. I mean, I would have never imagined that that being something that you would have to stress out about, right? And really, Indiana fans shouldn't have to be stressed out about that game. But UCLA is playing. They have zero cares in the world about what happens. They are playing with house money right now, so they will be playing to. We'll talk about that when we get to that game. But that'll be a very interesting, like, make sure the team is focused type of matchup for Indiana that week.
Yeah, I think actually probably a good segue. Welcome to college football. You just had the biggest win in school history. You just announced yourself officially to all the losers that didn't believe in you first. Now you got a Michigan State team that looks very vulnerable, and
they're already wanting to fire their second year head coach Jonathan Smith.
So tough for Jonathan Smith.
Cignetti has created this expectation with every other job that if you can't figure it out, you suck. You can't figure it out immediately, you suck.
Absolutely killed everyone. The new coach at Florida will be fired within a year, 2 years. I don't care if he wins 10 games, fired. Well, Indiana could go to the college football playoff 2 years in a row. Why can't you win the national championship? Sorry, not our problem. Not something we're going to have to deal with. But the next so I keep talking about first beginning of the year, I'm like, all right, Iowa. At Iowa, that's the big stepping stone for the program. Go on a road in the true Big Ten road game and win. And then everything else is gravy. Get that done. Go to Oregon and manhandle them in their building. Unbelievable test. Sneaky next test. Where's that chip on your shoulder going to come from now?
How are you are officially going. And this is something we've never been able to say before. Indiana's going to be favored to be undefeated at the end of the regular. They're going to the over/under is now set at 11.5 for a win total for Indiana football, which is outrageous.
They'll probably be double-digit favorites in every game for the rest of the year.
Maybe, yeah.
I would say most.
Penn State on the road, and again, I know that their bottom's falling out, but like I said, Penn State is favored right now at Iowa next week, which is baffling to me. Them coming off a 37-0 win against Wisconsin on the road. And I know Wisconsin's not very good, but I think Iowa's pretty damn good.
Yeah, I'll be taking Iowa. Thank you for filling me in on that.
That may have shifted since I've said that, but that's what it was.
Either way, I'm going to do it after this show, so hopefully it hasn't shifted that much. But it just, how do you – I thought about this a lot today, now that you've had some time to decompress. And I like to think of, because I still live in the glory days, I think of these weeks just whenever it pops in my head, like what was going on today. Like today they had meetings. They got back late last night, probably had later meetings, light little jog. Then you watch the tape. You're probably feeling pretty good about yourself. But Mendoza said something on his game day feature. It's never as good as you think. It's never as bad as you think. You're probably thinking it's pretty good. How do you take what happened, forget the result, see a lot of places where if we would have done this better, we could have won by 3 touchdowns. If we do this a little better, stop going off sides, make more contested plays. I don't care if they're grabbing all over you and you don't get any calls. Make the catch anyways. You make that happen. I mean, I think the sky's already the limit, but how do you now – it wasn't hard to go out before Saturday. If I don't know how many guys are doing this, probably getting tagged in a lot of this Twitter stuff, YouTube videos and stuff about guys talking bad about Indiana, but that's kind of dried up now. Everybody's like, wow, Indiana's for real. They've arrived. This is not a fun little story. These guys are bullies.
There's a reason we call this the mountain, because it really felt like the only genuine shut up moment you had on the schedule this year. I mean, maybe Penn State, but not you don't have that anymore because of what they've turned into.
Right. Yeah, it's how do you mentally reset and prepare for Michigan State the same way you did for Oregon? It hasn't been a problem yet at all. But there's not.
They've never had an emotional letdown. This team's never had the emotional letdown game.
They haven't. If they lost to Ohio State because Ohio State was just better on the defensive line than our offensive line. Other than that, we kind of stood up to them. Played great defense, had some special teams mishaps, and they just put a ton of pressure on Curtis Work. Same kind of thing at Notre Dame. They didn't do anything on offense except for one busted play. we just couldn't block them. We couldn't get anything going. Now that you can block them and you can move the ball on the best team, one of the best teams in America, nobody's talking about how whatever you suck. How do you refocus? I think it's going to be extremely telling the character of the team by the first quarter against Michigan State. What I expect to happen is business as usual and a win by 1 billion. That's what I expect to happen. That's what Cignetti has done over and over again. But there's
and you're playing for the
around.
Hawk Tua Trophy, who I've seen somebody now give it the nickname to the old brass platoon, the Hawk Tua Trophy.
All right, I respect that. It probably still has some of Ralph Green's spit in there. But you look at other teams around the country. I mean, Ole Miss almost got beat by Washington State, and Washington State's been getting blasted by everybody. They came into their building. Ole Miss got some big games coming up, and they just go through the motions. Now, do I think Cignetti and Lane Kiffin have a lot in common as coaches? No, I don't. I don't think they have
maybe in personality, but maybe not as coaches.
I don't think so. I think that Cignetti has gotten this reputation of this loud, arrogant kind of guy. I don't think that's necessarily the kind of guy that he wants to be. And he said as much. He had to talk a little crazy to get us to talk about it. We needed something to talk about. Think about 2 years ago. What's your prediction for the game? I just want to see some fight. I want something to be proud of, right? That was where we were as a fan base. That was everybody. So when he comes in, the place is dead. You have to ignite some fire. And he did that with his words and then with the play. But he hasn't.
And I keep going back to, I've thought about this quote a lot and even put it on social media earlier this weekend. At his first Big Ten Media Day, someone had asked him about bowl eligibility. And he was like, 6-6 is bullshit. And like that's now the mentality of every Indiana fan. Like 6-6, are you kidding me? Like that's below child's play at this point. And that's not meant to be an insult to the era of Indiana football that you were a part of, because that was the standard back then. But looking back on everything like this, go ahead.
Don't quit, play 13. That was Terry Hepner's mantra.
Yep.
Get to 6-6. And this guy doesn't think like that. But I do want to finish my point on his personality, because think about all the tidbit. We had something from him every week to talk about. He was a soundbite machine.
Yeah.
Think of one thing he said this year that's been loud.
I think the only thing that really drew a lot of attention nationally was, again, Big Ten Media Days. It was about the scheduling stuff. And he was very forward and really straightforward about his philosophy on what, out of conference schedules should be like and how they should all be uniform for every conference, that sort of thing. And that's really the only time you've gotten something brash or, very upfront, compared to what you had last year. And even then, that's still relatively tame. Like, you're not getting him saying, we're the emerging superpower of college football. Like, that's not going to come out of his mouth ever again.
No, it doesn't need to. He lets his players take care of the talking. And that feels more like his kind of personality. To just sit, make his face on the sideline, be very
Nick Saban-like.
Short and weird he does do weird halftime interviews.
He is. It's like he doesn't. If he doesn't have something prepped, like a zinger, if he doesn't have something like that ready, he's very unpolished behind a microphone.
He has no idea what he's going to say, and that's awesome. I don't want him to know what he's going to say. No. I want him to skip it all together. Just go get him ready in the locker room, and we'll see you in the second half. But it feels like a completely new Cignetti. He has a program right where he wants it. He has players that are accountable, that lead the team. It's players that are leading this team. Cignetti just manages it. And you can see that play itself out. When they pan to the sideline and, things go a little haywire or whatever, you got a lot of communications happening on the sideline during a timeout. A lot of that is player-led and player engagement with each other. And then the coaches come with the plan. A lot of that, hey, what are you seeing? How can we attack this? Is Mendoza and the receivers. or the right guard and the right tackle, communicating amongst themselves. Coaches are more of just a assurance, like, yeah, that's the right track. This is the kind of program that you're seeing is kind of Alabama-esque. I don't think we have quite the – I mean, no one had the talent that they have, so I don't think it's crazy to say that we don't have the talent of them. But they play like that. They are about as disciplined as I've ever seen. It never feels like they are out of position, even on the big play like that. The timing of the call for Oregon on the touchdown, I'm telling you, that was one of the coolest plays I've ever seen. I don't even consider that a blown coverage. Oregon just beat us on that play.
It was a confusing play
design. Beat us. They beat us. They're one of the best teams in the country. They're probably going to win sometimes. But it's I have so many thoughts that I'm not being very clear in what I'm saying. But it was just so freaking impressive how resilient and professional Indiana stayed and played with the lead and never let Oregon breathe. It was so impressive. And now you got to go out against Michigan State and beat them by 1,000.
I do want to. We haven't had a chance to talk about him yet. I haven't found a way to work him into it, but it goes along with what you were saying with the resiliency. But we've now had 2 games in a row where Mendoza has given up a crucial interception late in the game that could have spelled doom in both games. Could have eventually led to losses. One of them was a pick 6. The other one led to a missed field goal from Iowa. But the ensuing drive for Indiana with Fernando Mendoza both times ended in a touchdown for Indiana. Mm-hmm. And what was the first one, of course, was the game sealer against Iowa. And the second one, all but a game sealer. Of course, Indiana ended up getting a field goal later in the game as well with that second interception. Or I guess the first interception is what led to the field goal. The second interception is what led to all the kneeling and that sort of thing, which that was a very confusing sequence as well. The way that they ended up giving the ball back to Oregon. But nonetheless, initial point, Fernando Mendoza is not fazed by anything. He's given up 2 plays that could have spelled doom, as I mentioned earlier, and he's responded as perfectly as any quarterback could respond, both in road environments. The dude is not afraid of anything, and I don't think he will be afraid of any moment that could potentially come to him later on this season, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think it's his most impressive trait, and I watched him make round 1, pick 1 throws all day on Saturday. Some of those field stop routes that look routine, whatever, he's standing. That's a 35, 40-yard throw on an absolute frozen rope. Right on time. Like, he makes some incredible throws, can just hose it all around the field. Makes great plays with his legs when we need it, but his ability to compartmentalize, okay, that was a bad play. Could the receiver have flattened off and maybe batted it down? Sure, but it's a bad throw. Move on. And then he goes, 6 for 8, 5 for 7 on the next drive for like 68 yards. Goes right down the field, punches it in against the defense that's back against the wall, knows that if we give up a touchdown, we're in trouble on the 3-yard line, and our running backs just run right through their face. It's Mendoza for sure, but those huddles, when you go out after something like that happens, that takes 11 guys to make something like that happen. I don't know if it's maturity. I don't know if it's leadership. I don't know what it is, but their ability to wipe it away, as Kevin Johns would say, when you make a bad play, just wipe it away, done with it, let's go forward. Look out, college football world.
Last question. We'll wrap up right after this. What do you think is, if there's one weakness of this team right now, and you could point at the penalties from Oregon? I don't think that's a weakness. I think there was some gimmicky stuff going on that was causing it, but it's still, the penalties still happen. What's the one weakness that can maybe be exploited by an Ohio State, somebody that does have the talent and coaching ability behind them to beat Indiana? I know that's kind of a loaded question, but I didn't know if you had anything off the top.
No, the first thing that comes to my head is a number 3 receiver. Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt have been phenomenal, but you got a couple guys that have shown some flash. who's going to step up and add some, maybe take the top off the defense kind of pass play, or somebody, and they already, Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper already take care of everything over the middle. When we have a third down, we have guys to go to. So this is very nitpicky, and I definitely wouldn't call it a weakness, but having a third receiver that can add a little bit different wrinkle from what Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt bring, you get something like that, now you're really humming. And you give Mendoza 2, 3, 4 reads when you factor in the tight ends, progression reads with an O-line that can block people. That's, I don't even know what you would do. That,
Again, we are just it is very nitpicky, because it does kind of feel like they're a Rob Gronkowski away from having like the perfect offense. You know what I mean?
It feels like that. They're so efficient. The play calling is fantastic. Run first, which is so fun. They're physicality first. We talked about that. I keep bringing up Old Dominion, but
we said that at the very beginning of the season that this is probably going to be a run-first team. That doesn't mean – I think at the time it felt like we were saying they were going to rely heavily on the run, almost not exclusively, but more so than the pass. But no, it is the establishing part of the offense that allows you to open up everything else.
Running the ball is about physicality. And when I think my first thing was like, it's going to be a run-first team because this is going to be a physical team. And they're trying to establish that we're going to win at the line of scrimmage on offense and defense. And when you win the line of scrimmage, you're going to win a lot of games. And that was missing last year. And you've just seen it continually build from Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, Indiana State, Illinois. Obviously, we saw what happened. That was as much defense as anything. Had the offense humming for sure, but when you cause havoc like that, whatever, moving on. But Iowa got beat up a little bit, but I think that Iowa team's pretty good. We talked a lot about that. It all builds to Oregon, and then it continues building throughout the season. I don't even think this team's close with the capability. There's literally no ceiling for what this team can be offense and defense as they go into environments like Oregon. They handle success with games like Michigan State and UCLA, two teams that they'll probably be favored by 25 plus. I don't know what the early line on.
By the way, I'm looking at the early line. They are 26.5 point favorites against Michigan State.
Right. That's preposterous, but it's real.
Real quick, I was wrong about. I think I had it mixed up with the Penn State Iowa. Iowa's currently 3-point favorites against the Nittany Lions.
I still may take them to cover, but yeah, it's got a lot out there. Everything we want is in front of us. At no point in Indiana's history have I ever felt like this, and I think we're just getting started.
Mitchell Paige, everyone, that'll wrap up this week's segment. And again, next test for Indiana is the emotional letdown. They got a lot of games coming up that I was going to say a lot. They should win every game on their schedule until they get to the Big Ten championship game. We'll see if they're up for the challenge. Mitchell, we'll check in again next week, see if the Hoosiers are still in possession of the Spittoon, the Hawk Tua trophy, and then we'll move on from there.
Yes, sir. Have a great week, dude.
As always, we appreciate Mitchell Paige's time and everything that he brings to In Touch with Indiana Sports, and it's a pleasure to have him on each and every week whenever he's available, and we'll definitely do more of it as the season continues on. All right, we are going to welcome in Kenny Jordan here in a few minutes, but I do want to talk one real quick about probably the biggest piece of college football news that has been going around so far this week, and that was the firing of James Franklin from Penn State in the middle of the season. And of course, the reason I'm bringing this up primarily, and I know Mitchell and I kind of touched on it a little bit during the last segment, and that is the fact that Curt Cignetti is going to get mentioned for every big job in the country, and that definitely includes Penn State as well. Everybody is going to target somebody like him, even though he's 64 years old and likely won't coach for more than 10 more seasons, which that is a long time. And maybe he won't coach that long, but there is a chance that he could. He's definitely a young 64. a young 64 years old, I should say. But the reason I want to talk about this for a second is Tom Fornelli on the Cover 3 podcast. I have a piece of sound that I'm going to play for you all. And he kind of lays out why he doesn't think that Curt Cignetti will humor the Penn State job, and kind of lays out some of the reasons. And really what he says here doesn't just apply to the Penn State job. I feel like it applies to really any big name job that may come open during this coaching carousel cycle. So I'm going to go ahead right now and play what Tom Fornelli said on the Cover 3 podcast.
This is going to be a tough truth to swallow for Penn State fans. And I know that on the surface, based on everything you know of from college football, it won't make sense. Curt Cignetti's not leaving Indiana for Penn State. In 2025, we don't know for a fact that Penn State is a better job than Indiana. Curt Cignetti in the last few weeks has more top 10 wins at Indiana than James Franklin has at Penn State. Indiana has had a ton of financial support boosted into that program in recent years. Indiana is having the success that Penn State has been trying to have for years and was not able to have. There is no reason for Curt Cignetti to start over and move to Penn State when he's literally got it humming right the hell now at Indiana. He might win the Big Ten at Indiana. He's going to get to the college football playoff. I know that a whole lot of Penn State fans are going to want him. And in a vacuum, you think, well, clearly Penn State's better than Indiana. I don't know that it is. Not in this modern era. Things have changed really quickly. Indiana right now is looking like a very similar job to Penn State. So I would get over that. I do not think you're going to get Cignetti from Indiana. I think Indiana will pay him whatever the hell they have to keep him. And I do think he's going to get a raise.
So there you go. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from what was said during that is he made what is seemingly a bold statement that Indiana in the year 2025 is a better job than Penn State. And that throws all tradition out the window. And I had a conversation about this with some other people involved with the Big Ten, not the Big Ten conference, like the corporation part of it, but just people involved with different teams and that sort of thing, about how tradition in college sports means almost nothing nowadays. It means as little as it's ever had. And what I mean by that is what makes a job attractive 15, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago, before all this stuff really got rolling with NIL. That stuff, it can matter to an extent, but it really, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter. Only for brand purposes, right? That's the only thing that is truly kind of still a mainstay when it comes to all these quote unquote elite level jobs. Like Indiana football is not a national brand, but Curt Cignetti is a national brand when it comes to like the media attention that he brings. And he is now associated with Indiana. Therefore, his brand of football is this new blood, I guess, if you will, that has made Indiana this top level job that Tom Fornelli is kind of alluding to right there. And I think the same can be said when you look at things like college basketball. Like when Indiana was going through their coaching search this past offseason, and they ended up landing on Darren DeVries. People were throwing out names, of course, the impossible names that you always hear. You hear Brad Stevens. You're throwing Bruce Pearl out there, who's now retired. Scott Drew. Those were all shots in the dark. And you end up getting Darren DeVries. And here, another name I want to throw out there, too, that wasn't really getting mentioned, I believe, during the Indiana basketball coaching search, and that was Nate Oates at Alabama, the perennial football school. Nate Oates is able to be comfortable where he is because it's the exact same thing on the basketball side of things. Like in this new era of NIL, Alabama basketball can be good because it's not about the Alabama basketball brand. It's about the Nate Oates brand. Like he can do whatever he wants to do because they're giving him the funding there to get the players that he needs because they've seen what level of success he can bring in. Now, maybe that makes sense to some of you. Maybe it doesn't. But I think both of those scenarios can be flip-flopped when you think of Alabama basketball having success and big-time schools not being able to poach a Nate Oates simply based on brand, because that just doesn't matter as much as it used to. And so I do think Indiana football fans should find some solace, I guess, if you will, and not because I'm very convinced at this point, and maybe this makes me naive. I don't think there's a single job in the country except for maybe the Alabama job, if that were to ever come open within the next year or two. That's probably the only job that I think Cignetti may genuinely humor when it comes to, and that's the other thing too. Like he knows that he doesn't have to jump at the first big job that comes calling. If he really were to want something like the Alabama job, he can just sit there and hang out and have fun and win at Indiana until that job eventually comes open. If it does, and maybe it won't, but at the same time, if it doesn't, he's already doing what he can do at other schools in Bloomington, and maybe even better than some of those other schools like Tom Fornelli mentioned. What Indiana's doing right now this season is what Penn State wanted to do this year and in years past with James Franklin, and they've been unable to do it. So that's my little rant, if you will, on what's going on after, with all of the noise surrounding the Penn State coaching job and all that good stuff. So putting a bow on that, in just a moment, we're going to welcome in Kenny Jordan from Spartan Mag. But before that, I'm going to tell you once again about our friends at Roback Activewear. There's only one way to describe Roback. That is best fit and best feel. For those who aren't familiar with Roback, they're completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Roback has released so many items within their new licensed game day collection with novel polo designs and clean hoodie and quarter zips for some of your favorite schools, of course, ours being the Indiana Hoosiers. It's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else on the market is pairing this level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. Roback's everyday shorts or their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. They're both super comfortable, have an elastic waistband and great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short look, but the comfort for a day on the move. Roback has also been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars, past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. Now, as always, you can use the code IND20 on Roback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers through the end of this week. It's always said through the end of this week. I don't think that's true, but that's if you can still use that code now, IND20 for that 20% off. Again, that's spelled RHOBACK.com for 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more. Let's welcome in from Spartan Mag, Mr. Kenny Jordan. Joining me now from Michigan State On 3, Spartan Mag, it is staff writer Kenny Jordan. Welcome into In Touch with Indiana Sports. Pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So the old brass spittoon game coming up this weekend. It's, believe it or not, the last several years, this has been a back and forth rivalry of sorts, if you even really want to call it a rivalry. It's more of just a trophy game than a traditional rivalry, but nonetheless, Indiana and Michigan State battling for one of the more disgusting trophies, if you will, this upcoming Saturday, I would say.
Yeah. It's not very appeasing to the eye, I don't think.
I heard somebody kind of jokingly refer to it now as the Hawk Tua trophy, which again, the Hawk Tua lady has kind of been out of the spotlight for quite some time now, but I do think it is very fitting, of course. But either way, Hoosiers 6-0, number 3 right now in the AP poll, welcoming the 3-3 Michigan State Spartans. How has Michigan State gotten here? I feel like things, especially when you look at last week's result against UCLA, things have unfortunately for Michigan State taken a bit of a downward turn at this point in the season.
Yeah, I would say so. That was last week was pretty much the low of the Jonathan Smith regime. A year and a half in now. It was not a good look there. The 2 games before that, you lose to USC and then you lose to Nebraska on the road. Both those were, expected. They were underdogs, both those games, I guess. And really, you thought you kind of, from my standpoint, you kind of looked at it. You took some good things from both those games, and then to come out the way they did on homecoming last week was just kind of disappointing to everybody, fans, alum, everybody. So, yeah. And then you got, coming into this week now with Indiana, you got a team going up a 6-0 team on the road. Doesn't look like it's going to get much better for Michigan State, but
well, I did say this to a buddy of mine who's a Michigan State fan the other day. The best case scenario I felt like for Michigan State was for Indiana to get the emotional win at Oregon. And then if you're Michigan State, you kind of hope that there's that letdown that Indiana hasn't really experienced so far in the Curt Cignetti era, because they haven't really had a win quite, the magnitude level of beating in Oregon.
Right.
So it'll definitely be, that's definitely going to be one of the bigger storylines to follow, is how Indiana will respond after, again, what not only the biggest win in Cignetti's tenure, but likely the biggest win in the entire history of the program thus far.
Yeah.
So that's probably, it's definitely, I would say, and you can, of course, give your thoughts on what you think could happen in terms of if it's a good outcome for Michigan State. But I would say it's definitely a good idea early if they're able to kind of catch Indiana maybe sleeping a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree. And Michigan State, they've started well. I think they've scored touchdowns on 5 of their 6 opening possessions this year. So it's not really how they start. It's, kind of that in between there where it's like they kind of lose it there. And then the second half last week, especially too, you kind of gave up. It looked like some different guys gave up and things like that. But yeah, you're right. If they do have any chance, it's probably just to come out and try to catch them off guard. And
what do you think has been kind of the high point? Because I know Aiden Childs last year was kind of up and down. He was an intense quarterback that he got a lot of touchdowns, but he also threw a lot of interceptions. I haven't been tracking his numbers necessarily the same way that I had did last season. But I do remember in the Indiana-Michigan State game last year, the Spartans gave Indiana their first deficit of the entire season. Of course, that was very short-lived after the game progressed a little bit. But what have you kind of seen from year 1 to year 2 with Jonathan Smith and also in particular Aiden Childs at quarterback?
Yeah, Childs looked, he early in the season, he looked like he had improved a lot, cut down on the interceptions. That was a thing for him last year, especially early in the year last year, where I think he had like 9 interceptions or something through the first 4 games or 5 games. So yeah, he had cut down on the interceptions, and the Boston College game, I would say, was probably the high point. They came back and beat Boston College in double overtime. But even after that, I mean, he looked good. Playing against USC, I felt like too. And then last week against Nebraska, it kind of hit a lot and was on the ground a lot. And he actually came out for a little bit. And then going into the UCLA game, he just didn't have it. So it was like, I'm not sure if he's still hurt or what, but I know he's going to be a game time decision probably this coming Saturday. So
what would you say when Michigan State is at full strength? What would you say is this particular team's biggest, weapon, whether it be offensively, defensively? What's their biggest threat to doing something against Indiana or any team for that matter?
Nick Marsh, probably, getting him the ball. I know that was a big thing with the Nebraska game, not getting him the ball. So, but yeah, he's the most explosive weapon I think they have. It's just a matter of being able to get him the ball, not having consistent quarterback play.
And then I guess going to the other side of things, and then I'm not asking necessarily for one particular thing, or just what would you say has been, and I guess maybe this season in particular, what's kind of been the Achilles heel for Michigan State?
Yeah, I feel like it's like kind of been all like nothing consistency in all 3 at the same time, I guess, because it kind of seems like there's been different times where like the USC game, the defense couldn't get a stop.
Yeah.
But week after that, Nebraska, the offense couldn't get a first down, but the defense played actually pretty well, I thought. And then this past week, special teams hurt them in the Nebraska game as well. But yeah, it's just kind of been like not being able to get all 3 phases at the same time type of deal, where it's not like they have one glaring weakness, but they're not really that good at anything, if that makes sense.
Would you say that Michigan State fans, through about, a year and a half with Jonathan Smith, are they already frustrated? We've seen so many early firings at this point in the college football season. Of course, the most notable so far, James Franklin at Penn State. And I'm sure there's plenty more to come. I don't know what the total will end up getting to. again, you would know better than I would, but are Michigan State fans already impatient with Jonathan Smith?
Yeah, I think they're impatient. I think the biggest thing with the whole impatient, I know like this past weekend against UCLA was probably the low point so far just because it's year 2 and everything, but I think the biggest thing for Smith that fans are starting to tilt that way is just his he's not a real vocal type of coach. He's not like a Cignetti where he'll come out and say things, but then he'll deliver as well. And different styles of coaching, I guess, but he hasn't really, and he's not a Midwest guy. He's not a Michigan guy. So nobody knows him that well, really. And then on top of that, losing games doesn't help your cause, I guess. So yeah, I think the fans are frustrated, and it's hard to really argue against it at this point with the results being the way they are.
It is strange that Cignetti has created this idea from it's created this mythical idea, I should say, that, and there are probably certain coaches who can, I guess, do what I'm about to say, and that is, show up day one, get your system implemented, get your players in, and start winning immediately. I'm sure there are a handful of other guys who can do that, but it's also, again, created this impossible standard that I would say 95% of coaches would be unable to live up to. So,
right. No,
if you don't see this success, like even if you just see minor success from Cignetti, if they go 8-4 last year or something, and they're doing something similar this year, I doubt you see some of the similar I mean, yeah, you might still get frustrated fans depending on how other things play out, but it's just a very strange thing that Curt Cignetti has created with this Indiana football program for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. And yeah, on top of that too, it's like a little bit, like it was the same year type of deal where it was Cignetti goes there, yada yada yada. So kind of like you said, especially for Michigan State fans, I feel like that would it probably frustrates quite a few of them seeing the success that Indiana has had and where Michigan State has been the last year and a half, really.
What would you say needs to be done for the remainder of the season if Jonathan Smith were to be retained? Do you think he'll be staying no matter what, especially when you think about how many jobs are already opened up? Because when the playing field for a new coach is this large already, and if you're not a Penn State, for an example, you almost want to wait it out another coaching cycle and get somebody who may be a little more high profile.
Right. Yeah, no, I don't think he's gone. Like I think he'll be at Michigan State next year unless something like really, really awful or something happened. Unforeseen.
Mel Tucker style awful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, no, I think he'll be there. What was the second part of the question? Sorry.
Just kind of waiting. Like, do you think like if they were to make a move, they'd wait at least another year just because of the large kind of playing field of the coaching search that you'll have this offseason?
Yeah, and I think 3 years. I think if you get, basically if he's in 1 year from today, if they're in the same position that they are right now, then you'll already know, he's going to be gone at the end of the season or whatever. But I think you have to give them at least that like 2.5 years to at least establish some sort of culture and get backing from the fans and donors and things like that. And if it doesn't happen, that I think he'll be gone by year 3 basically. But I don't see them making a change after 2 years. I don't think that sets a very good precedent either.
Yeah. I guess getting back to this upcoming Saturday's game, we talked a little bit earlier, I guess, if Michigan State is going to find success against Indiana, they may have to jump out early. You said that they've made a habit of getting out to good starts.
Right.
Is there anything else specifically that comes to mind when you think, okay, if Michigan State can pull off this upset, what do you think? And I'm not asking you to necessarily break down Indiana specifically, but what do you think they're going to have to do, especially going into a road environment in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to get off the field on third down. I mean, probably just a lot of that's just kind of coach speak, I guess. But
Yeah.
I haven't really watched Indiana enough to really have an opinion on the team they have this year, I guess. But yeah, I mean, they look explosive though. And I think that Michigan State really their only chances to probably to play in a shootout with them, because I don't see the offense from Indiana slowing down much.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, Memorial Stadium with Curt Cignetti has been a place where he's like to bury teams, and people
Yeah.
call it running up the score. And there may be, I think, especially last year, that may have been more of the case, because I felt like Cignetti thought he had to do that to make a statement with the level of the schedule that was, or at least what the schedule ended up being. You had a runner up in Washington that had a down season. You had the national champion in Michigan who also had a down season.
right.
So there was this extra incentive to put up points. And you know, I'm not sure if that's going to continue in this particular scenario. I got to say, it's very weird growing up seeing Indiana football be what they were for forever, and kind of seeing them turn into this antithesis. It's almost weird to even talk about them in this way as being I believe Indiana's a 26.5-point favorite coming into this game, which is unheard of in any other any season before the last two is unheard of.
Right, for sure.
Go ahead.
I remember, I was just gonna say, I do remember a few years ago, Indiana had a pretty good team. Was it COVID year when you guys had Penix?
Yeah, Tom Allen. That was created all this new Tom Allen, he wasn't an interim coach, but they had let Kevin Wilson go. They immediately elevated former defensive coordinator Tom Allen to head coach. They didn't even give him the interim tag. He was immediately the head coach. They lost a bowl game and then went 8-4 in 2019. And then I believe it's 2020. That's what you're referring to. You had Michael Penix had kind of the breakout COVID year. Very strange.
Yeah.
They beat a top 10 Penn State team. They beat a Michigan team that was in the top 15. Went on the road and beat Michigan State that year. I don't remember if they were in the top 25 at the time or anything like that. But yeah, that was a very strange season. But then the bottom fell out for Tom Allen right after that. They followed that up by going, I think it was 2-10, which is absolutely insane. They brought back a lot of the same guys and a lot of the same staffs. Not everybody, but a lot of the same staff. And so it was very huge drop off.
Too, right?
What'd you say?
Was Penix hurt that next year?
Yeah, Penix was on and off injured, I believe, throughout his entire career at Indiana. Yeah. I don't think he ever finished a full season in his. I think he was there for 3 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Gotcha. Yeah. I was just thinking back to like Indiana football and like what I remember, and like that's the only thing that I really remember them being good, to be honest.
Yeah, there's been some ho-hum years, seasons where they went 6-6. The 8-4 year with Tom Allen was pretty interesting, and the sustained success is what's never been there, and the sustainability now really comes down to how long Curt Cignetti's going to decide he's going to be in Bloomington, which of course Indiana fans hope it's until he retires, considering he's already 64 years old. Every major job in the country is going to be figuring out if there is a way to get him out of Bloomington, but I mean, you have to think that even if that were to be the case, you wouldn't hear any rumblings of that until you get to the off season, of course, which who knows, when that will end up taking place for Indiana, if they're able to make another deep run or something like that. But either way, Kenny, before I let you go, any final thoughts on what you expect from the old brass spittoon game this upcoming Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, I guess as Indiana fans, I would probably feel pretty confident in keeping that old brass spittoon. But I do think that Michigan State is kind of a team too that does play. They kind of play up and down to the competition. It seems like so far under Smith, but I just don't think they have the depth to really to be able to hang with Indiana. But so I would say Indiana is probably going to end up blowing them out in the second half. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's kind of a closer game the first quarter or two. But
yeah, No, I'm definitely feel along those same lines right now, just because there is the unknown on how emotionally hungover Indiana may still be. I do think Cignetti will have them prepared for avoiding that type of letdown altogether.
Yeah, he
But
seems like a
sometimes
coach.
that is still unavoidable.
Yeah. Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what Michigan State, I guess, does as far as quarterback with
Who is
Childs.
their backup quarterback?
His name is Alessio Milval. I have a terrible time saying his name. Milalovich.
Okay.
He's a redshirt freshman from the Chicago area. But yeah, he came in, played against Nebraska a little bit, and then he played most of the game last week. And yeah, he's not bad, but he's got a long ways to go too.
Well, Kenny, I appreciate you giving me a little bit of your time. Thanks for letting me in on what's going on with the Spartans, what to expect as they make their way to Bloomington this Saturday. And I would say good luck to the Spartans, but of course that wouldn't benefit me none. So, but either way, appreciate you coming on the show, man.
Yep, no problem.
And we'll definitely continue to build these new relationships with some of our On3 partners with different schools, not only throughout football season, but once we get into basketball season as well. So appreciate Kenny and all those who have also come on throughout the season so far. All right, we're going to wrap this up shortly, but as always, let's go ahead and check on some of the sports in Bloomington that don't get nearly as much attention. And we'll start with men's soccer. They have gotten back to their winning ways with the win against Ohio State, 4-2 at Bill Armstrong Stadium. That comes after an unfortunate 3-0 loss on the west coast of Washington. This week, they'll take on Kentucky down in Lexington. That is tonight at 7 o'clock on ESPN+. And then Hanover College, very weird game, sandwiched at this point in the schedule. This Friday, also at 7 o'clock, the game broadcast on Big Ten Plus. So out of conference play exclusively this week for Indiana men's soccer. Moving over to the women's side of things, they, if you remember last time we talked, they were in a kind of a draw, a tie streak going on. They have since won against Northwestern 2-1 at Bill Armstrong Stadium. Then they drew once again. They were on the road at Michigan 2-2. They'll be back in action this Thursday. Also on the road once again against Michigan State. That game broadcast on Big Ten Plus. And then next Sunday, they'll be back at Armstrong Stadium hosting the Penn State Nittany Lions. And then finally, moving over to women's volleyball. Coming into our last check-in, they'd only had one loss on the season. They were coming off a big West Coast road trip, but they defeated two ranked teams in a row, USC number 17 and 24th ranked UCLA. They followed that up with a win in Ann Arbor, 3-0. And then, unfortunately, this past Sunday, they took their first loss in Big Ten play, and it was not a pretty one. They got shut out 3-0 in East Lansing. And their record currently stands at 14-2, with this being their first loss in conference play, as I mentioned previously. This week, they will play Purdue in Gainbridge Fieldhouse, number 12 Purdue. That's this Thursday, 7 o'clock, broadcast on Big Ten Network. And then this Sunday, they'll also have a Big Ten Network game back in Bloomington, welcoming in the Ohio State Buckeyes. So two big matches once again for Indiana women's volleyball. All right, that's going to go ahead and wrap up today's edition of the show. We'll be back next week to do it all again, and maybe we'll get into some more basketball talk next week. I know I've kind of neglected it, and I know we're not in basketball season just yet. I just know that there's some people like that's what you're here for. You're ready for basketball season all the time, and I get it. But as I said at the beginning of the show, Indiana football is in unprecedented, uncharted territory right now. So that is absolutely where my focus is going to be for the time being. So until next week, this has been another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by thehoosier.com.